I asked him some more about some of the specific differences between 2022 and today.
The Ukrainian forces have many different types of drones. Some of them are made abroad, some of them are their own creations, made in just in small labs, and they produce quite a lot of them. But Russian Ministry of Defense has made giant lines of production, and Russia now is producing maybe less models of drones, but the quantities are absolutely tremendous, and the front is enriched by Russian drones at the moment. And when Russian economy became the war economy, when Russian factories and military factories started producing drones en masse, they managed to outperform themselves. And now our frontline is, we have a lot of drones. At the beginning of the conflict, drones weren't used in such large qualities. And to tell the truth, in 2022, almost no one understood the true potency of them and how harmful they could be. So when we were at the front lines, me and my cameraman, we didn't even pay too much attention to the skies.
Yeah, so that just shows you how much difference the war was. Where he was apparently a journalist on the Russian side covering the advance of the Russian forces in there, and they didn't even pay attention to skies. I assure you that is no longer the case anywhere near the front line on either side of it, because right now you literally take your life into your hands if you, as some of the folks we've shown you on both the Russian and the Ukraine side have said, if you just get out of your trenches to go to the bathroom, you literally taking your life into your hands. And so that has dramatically changed. And we saw that actually in the first. If anybody had learned some of the lessons of the Azerbaijan-Armenia war, it was the Ukraine side, because they actually had some of those same drones. I think they were called the Bakhtiar drones. And they were used in pretty small quantities. And so that validates what we have seen outside, and what his experience is that at first the quantity of the drones, in addition to the quality, was just not there. And again, it's one of the reasons why Russia was able to just flood in so deep, because there simply weren't enough of the Bakhtiars or anything else for that matter to really stop them. At that point, especially in the beginning, artillery was still the king of the battle. But he continued on here talking about how rapidly they created and how the Russian side, once they figured out what was needed, how they solved that problem.
Drones became a thing when people understood that you can use a small drone which costs almost nothing to destroy a tank which costs millions of dollars, that you can harass enemy supply lines without losing your people, without losing expensive artillery shells. You just take an operator and attack them. And when it became evident that drones are super effective, both sides switched to using drones instead of using heavy armored vehicles, etc. And the thing is that the Russian civil society, it modernized itself. It understood that the front needs a lot of drones, and Russian civilian people started assembling, offering the Ministry of Defense different models, and the people from the Ministry of Defense started to work with our civilian engineers, trying to find out the best models and to start producing them for the needs of our army.
You may recall we had a show on, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I can't remember now when, where we had a Russian drone operator, actually not a drone operator, I'm sorry, a drone builder. And he's one of these people that George was talking about right there, that was from the civil society. And that they said, hey, we have technological capability. And so they were learning how to build these drones, et cetera, and how to make them better and all that kind of stuff. And so he talked about it. And that's what we saw actually on a very large scale. Again, both sides of the line. The Ukraine side did the exact same thing, does the exact same thing, is that they have lots of small individual companies that vie to make these, and some of them come up with their own designs, their own modifications, et cetera, and they keep iterating them and go into the front line. Things that don't work get jettisoned, things that do work get reinforced. And apparently, according to what they're saying here, is that when some of these smaller firms that are nimble and that they can make changes like overnight, whereas some of the big firms and factories, et cetera, are very, very slow to change just because of the nature of how a factory runs, the bureaucracy and all that. They bypassed a lot of that by saying, hey, let's get a lot of these little guys. And then once somebody comes up with a model that works and can be sustained in combat, then they'll take it to the larger firms, and then they'll mass produce them on scales that the other side, some of these smaller folks just can't ever produce. And the Ukraine side is similar to that, but not quite as much, because they don't have control of the skies, and they can't have large factories anywhere, because then they become a target for Russian Iskander missiles or Kinzhals or some of these other hypersonics or even drones, and they can't protect everything everywhere, so they end up getting blown up. So that means that Ukraine has to make smaller firms and smaller production factories and trying to keep them secret from everybody, and then scatter them everywhere. And that is effective in one sense, because you don't have a single point of failure. Russia can't launch a missile and take out an entire factory. If they do take out something, it's a small one, so the impact is not big. But the problem is also it's harder to get things to scale. So it's kind of a win or lose kind of situation. You just got to pick your poison, is the bottom line, because it is, after all, warfare. Then we moved on to a different topic here. And one of the things that has really been a point of contention, especially in the West, is the relationship between the Slavic Brotherhood of the Ukraine side and the Russian side. And, there's history that you may recall when Tucker Carlson went to interview Vladimir Putin in, I think it was early 2023. He talked to him and went to Russia, and he famously gave this really long history lesson going back centuries and talking about the relationship between the two sides, et cetera. And then you have other folks that are saying, no, actually, Russia hates the Slavs. They hate the Ukraine. They think they're subhuman or something like that. All different kinds of things. So we thought, let's ask him, how does the Russian side see the Ukraine side?
In Russia, there are hundreds of nationalities, and they are considered as brothers. And Ukrainians are our brother nation, and we always had good relationship with them. But suddenly, since 2014, it changed, and somehow Ukrainians became self-excluded from our brother family. And he is wondering, how could that happen? Because people who love each other, who know each other for such a long time, they suddenly became enemies. And he said that there were a lot of different small things that alienated nations to each other, and they caused this conflict in the end. So it was long-term provoked by something not from the inside, but from the outside.
So his comment is that this was something that was externally pushed, i.e. that the two sides were put in enmity towards each other because they had cousin kind of relationship, if I can use that term, historically. And obviously during the Soviet times, everybody got along relatively well, and there wasn't a whole lot of problem until the events of 2014. And that's when we certainly know from the historical record, and we've shown you videos that prove it one way or the other, you don't even have to take anyone's word for it, is that the United States and many in Europe helped foster the overturning of a legally elected government in Ukraine in 2014, taking advantage of the violence of the Maidan affair, et cetera, and basically installed a Western-friendly government after that. The Russians call it a coup. The Western side calls it a people making their own choice and self-determination, et cetera. You can wordsmith it all day long. But the bottom line is that the West got really involved, the United States in particular, and I think that I think it's pretty fair to say that there were many on the Western side that desired to cause problems for Russia and fostered the enmity between the two sides and fed it, so that it continued on to have this, growing level of anger and then towards outright hatred. Trump talks about this all the time, is that the hatred between the two sides is just off the charts. Definitely Zelensky does not even attempt to hide his hatred of Russia and Putin in particular. So the question is going to be, is this something that can be overcome? My guess is that over time that it can be, because you're talking about historical relations going back centuries that where they were, there's of the similar ancestry, et cetera. And I think with good leadership and enough time, to let a lot of this anger boil down. I think that they can be, and I certainly hope that's the case. However this is resolved into the future, everybody's going to have to learn to live together. They're going to have to live in proximity to one another. And look, I mean, history shows it a lot. I mean, there's, the hatred, the absolute just vicious hatred between, say, France and Germany after World War II, after Germany invaded them, or between Britain and Germany. And you see that over time, those got healed, and then they ended up being, close allies. Same with Vietnam. We just detested each other with all of our heart. Now then you see Trump actually bragging about doing deals with Vietnam, et cetera, and the doors are open. So it has happened in the past. It will happen at some point in the future. The sooner, the better for all the people involved. And we need to make sure that we stop doing things that fan the flames of the divisions to keep it going for nefarious purposes that serve no one's interest on the ground, only the pockets of some who benefit from the conflict.